All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a very futuristic sci-fi technological topic, the human mind as a computer. And before we start, I have a confession to make. I'm not a big fan of all things sci-fi and technological. I'm much more the magical fantasy type, and I'll prove it to you with this poem that I'm going to recite. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not touched by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A flame from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Go Aragorn. Aragorn. Alright, so let's start. But the mind is a computer because it is a good analogy. The mind is a computer of sorts. And before we talk about this, I'm not actually talking about the human brain. The human brain is, well, I'm not an expert on the human brain. I'm not a neurologist. But it is a conglomeration or a network of nerve channels and tissue and neurons, and it is part of the nervous system. I'm talking about the mind. And let us not ask right now, where is the mind? What is the mind? But let's talk about it as a function. And the function of the mind is to remember, to think, to retain information. And let's compare it to a computer. Because after all, we don't ask the question, where is the software of the computer? We see the hardware, we don't necessarily see the software. But human memory and the speed of that memory and the speed of retrieving information could very well be compared to a computer. So think of a computer, old or new, modern or obsolete, but how would a computer in good shape function? Just think about it. It would be fast. It would not have viruses or malware or bugs of any sort or kind, right? When you needed a certain file or a certain program, it would retrieve it quickly. And its operating memory, as well as its, whatever you call it, the other memory, the storing memory, they would be relatively vast. And even if the storage memory is not super vast, it would still be fast. So now let's think about the human mind. I would say this applies more to interpreters, but it also does apply to translators. What do you want your mind to be like when you're interpreting? Same thing, same difference. You want it to retrieve information super fast, right? If you want a word for oak, the tree, or tall, or girl, or stay of adjudication in court, or a rodent, or what have you, you want the word in the other language to come like this. And it is very similar to a computer. It is fast retrieval. So a mind that is in good shape will retrieve information super fast. But obviously will only retrieve information that it has acquired or that it has, right? Like a computer does not have files or it does not have data which has not been stored on the computer. So our vocabulary or our linguistic knowledge or our erudition is only as big or as vast as we have acquired. And that's obviously your job in acquiring. And that's like downloading programs onto the computer. And that's great and that's good. But the fact that programs have been downloaded into the computer does not necessarily mean that those programs are easily and swiftly accessible. And that's the other point. If your mind is in good shape, these programs will be swiftly accessible, right? They will be in your active vocabulary, not your passive vocabulary. And that's probably those are my bragging rights. I'm going to make a confession. I'm not the most educated linguist in the world, theoretically speaking. There are people in all of my languages who have bigger and better vocabulary. There are people who have more grammatical knowledge than I do. They know where to place the commas and where not to place the commas. And not only that, they're more versed in various grammatical rules and maybe they know more synonyms, but somehow or other, the reason why I'm a very high quality linguist is because the gap between my theoretical knowledge or the knowledge that I have and my applicable knowledge is probably very small. It's still there, And I don't know the exact very reason why that's so. I could conjecture reasons, you know, but that's just the way it is. So that is the thing to work on. And how you work on it is probably the topic of another clips, but off the top of my head or off the cuff, I can think of different things. You have to do different kinds of trainings, and you can train your mind just through the action of interpreting. So always be interpreting, always be closing, always be interpreting, always be translating. Also, always be training. It's a good idea to train, and training and doing are not the same thing. There are different exercises for the mind that you can do, and you can get in touch and I can tell you what those are. That's different, but that is basically the human mind as a computer. And anything which could be a virus or a bug, you want to get rid of. Like, you know this better than me. If you take alcohol or drugs, God forbid, to access, well, then stop, because there are bugs. Or if there's something else impeding your mind from functioning like a well-oiled computer, there you have it. don't add olive oil or machine oil to your computer, yeah. So that's it. So just to reiterate, it's the scope of information plus the readiness with which that information is available. And I would say that point number 2 is more important. Actually, all is important. Now, I'm not going to say point number 2 is more important. Never mind, scratch that, strike that, your honors. So yeah, both are important. But you want to work on this. And the best way to work on it is, well, reading helps you acquire vocabulary, erudition, again, reading, watching movies, talking to smart people, going to museums, but then also working on the swiftness of the retrieval of that information. And that is done through interpreting, and it can also be done in other ways. So that was my analogy of the mind as a computer. And I want to leave you with Neo from the Matrix. Maybe we can even show a video. Remember how for 7 hours straight he's just imbibing and absorbing information, then he wakes up and says to Morpheus, I know Kung Fu. And Morpheus says, that's right, show me. And then they go and he shows him, and he does actually know it. But an interesting point happens is where he knows it, but he knows it practically theoretically, and Morpheus can still coach him on it. So that's like the ni plus ultra of application. That's like application squared. But before I get way too esoteric, let's end off. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch my professional clip and share it. Not because I wish to brag, but because I wish the word to get out there about me as a linguist, because I also always need to keep my mind in the best of all possible shapes and practice it, so I can braggadociously show it off during my next webinar, where you'll all obviously be. Anyway, good morning, good night, good evening. Talk to you guys soon.